But anyway, welcome again to What Would Kay Say? And if you missed any of my other shows, you can go to my show page on Radio Free Brooklyn. What Would Kay Say? Go into the archive. It's on, my shows are on all podcast platforms. And you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, Kenya Z. Edwards. On YouTube, I believe it's just Kenya Edwards. I'm not sure, but any combination of Kenya Z. Edwards or Kenya Edwards, you'll be able to find me. And if you're listening to the replay, I thank you for deciding to tune in to hear what God has to say to you. And just know that anytime you tune in is always the right time for you. So now, let's get started. Now, if you're listening, and if you have been listening, you'll know that we have been on these series of topics that have been circling around the idea of who is really in control of what happens in your life, right? So of course I want to continue along the same, road that we've been going down, because I feel that there's a message in there. In all the topics we've been talking about, there's a message that God is trying to get to us. So we discussed the fact that our bodies belong to God and that we should keep them pure and undefiled. We discussed how strongholds and soul ties play a major part in our lives, and we learned how to break those chains, and to create change in our life. That was a tongue twister. So today, I want to speak about temptations. Because it's the temptations, right? It's the temptations, when you give into the temptations, that could lead you to the soul ties and the soul ties and the strongholds. And if you notice, they all have that same common theme. All the topics we've been discussing are based on decisions that you make. And I think that's the point that God is trying to get across to us. He gave us the power of free will, meaning you can decide what it is that you do, be it good or bad. And he wants you to pay more attention to that, rather than go through life and act like, oh, well, whatever happens, happens, and I just got to go with the flow, and, we'll see. No, we won't see. We'll see afterwards if you don't take any actions. But everything that happens to you, your family, in your community, it all starts with a decision that you made. So today's topic, since we're talking about temptation today, today's topic is titled, Temptation Will Not Be the End of You. And we're going to take it from scriptures written in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 6 through 13. Now I'm going to be reading from the New King James unless I specify otherwise. And this is kind of long, but it's very important, and I needed to start from 6 in order for you to get the true understanding of what it is that we're talking about here. So it's 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6 through 13. Now these things became our examples, to the extent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. And do not become idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now, all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonish, ad, admonition, admonition. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying this word this morning. Admonition, okay? Let's just get it straight. You see, the devil doesn't want me to get this information to you because he knows how important it is for you to understand the message that God is trying to give you. So now all these were written as examples so that upon the ends of the ages, we've come, right? We've come to the end of the ages. Let me read number 11 again because I totally screwed that up. This is scripture 11. Now, all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Blessed is he who reads and those who hears the words of this prophecy and keeps those things which are written in it, for the time is near. Revelation 1:3. So now, Holy Spirit, I'm going to calm myself because we're going to get through this topic so everyone can understand how temptations play an important part in your life and how you decide how you deal with them. So when we think about this, and the scriptures that I just read, the scriptures tell us that all these things happened to them as examples and were written for us, for our counsel, for our warning, upon who the end of ages has come. So when we listen to the scriptures and they tell us that they're warning us that just like in the beginning, we too can fall the same way that they did. And here we stand in the end of the ages. The scriptures is telling us we're standing in the end of the ages and that Christ is soon to return. But we have to be diligent and stay the course because the time is growing near. And these scriptures let us know that temptation is common to all, right? Immorality, greed, idolatry, all of those things, they're the hardest forms of temptation that we resist. And we can't rely on our own understanding or self-reliance. We have to depend on the one who lives within us, the one who leads us to all truths and says what he hears from the Father. So now let me just back up because I did make a statement, but I want to clarify something for you. When I said that we are living in the end of ages, of course, you know, everybody always says, oh yeah, Christ is soon to return, he's soon to return. And yes, we do believe that to be true. But I just want to make this statement so that everyone understands correctly. When we're looking at signs, we're looking at the signs that Christ is soon to return, right? But that return that we're looking at when we're following the signs is his return after the tribulation. Like, that's where the signs are going to show us. The signs are showing us that the tribulation is about to, is going to be underway. And when he comes back is when he's coming back to set the record straight for all. But that has nothing to do with the rapture. Now, the rapture happens before the tribulation. So don't think that the signs that are happening in the world are going to tell you when Jesus is coming to rapture the church. No, those are two different things. So I don't want people to get confused and figure, oh, well, I have time, I have time, I have time. Because you really, like the word told us, no one knows the time when he's going to return. So you have to be ready at all times. And that's why I believe God is really keeping us on this track of reminding us that everything we do is based on the decisions that we make. So now, we've all experienced the sensation of temptation, right? And temptation is a physical thing, not just spiritually, but it's your body goes through changes when you're in the midst of being tempted or in the midst of a temptation. You get, your heart starts racing, your breathing becomes shallow, you break out in a sweat, right? You could become overheated. It's almost like as if your body is going into a panic mode. And this doesn't just happen to believers, it happens to non-believers as well. It happens to anyone who feels when they're put in a situation and they have to make a decision of what are they going to do? Like, what am I going to do next, right? And Matthew 4:1 tells us that even Christ himself was put in a situation for temptation. Christ was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Now, why do you think that God allowed Christ to be led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil? And this was after his baptism. So you figure after he was baptized and he came up out the water and the skies opened up and you heard the voice of God saying, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." Why would you think he would then lead him into the wilderness to be tempted? He had to, because for Christ to be able to understand everything that we have to go through, he had to experience it. So the scripture tells us that he was led into the wilderness by the Spirit, and then he was tempted by the devil. So this tells us two things. Number one, temptation comes from the devil and not from God. It doesn't come from God, but God can allow it to happen because the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted. So yes, God can allow for temptation to come upon you, but it's only given to you by the devil. And number two, temptation takes place in a controlled environment. Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. He knew where he was going, and he was going to be tempted. So when you think about your various forms of temptation that have come upon you in the past, when you think about it, hasn't it always happened when you were in a space that you knew you were in that space? Like, it didn't happen where, you go to someplace strange and you don't know what's going on and, oh, I'm tempted. Usually when you're tempted, you're always in an environment that's familiar to you and that might even be quite comfortable to you as well. So Jesus was led into the wilderness by the Spirit. And when I say quite comfortable, is because Jesus knew the Spirit. So that's why he went there. He went with the Spirit into the wilderness. He was comfortable. It wasn't like a stranger was leading him someplace and he didn't know where he was going. And that's what happens with a lot of us. Strangers don't lead us into temptation. We're usually tempted when we're around people that we're very comfortable with. So when Jesus was in the wilderness, he was tempted. And the three areas that he was tempted in was his flesh, because he was tempted because he was hungry, right? And what he saw, he was tempted with, promise that he would get the world. That's what the devil promised him with. And then he was tempted with his pride because the devil was toying with his identity, right? Like, was Jesus going to stand up and say, listen, I'm the Son of God and I could just, kill you right now and get it over with? No. But the devil was toying with him with that. And those are the three areas that tempt us as well. Think about it. The devil will tempt us with our flesh when it comes to sex, drugs, alcohol, food, all these things, material things, right? Then he'll tempt us with the material things of the shiny new objects, by what we see, everything that's glittering. And then he also tempts us with our identity, where he tells us or he challenges us that we're not worthy and that we can't do what God has told us that we can do. And he makes us doubt our righteousness that we've received through Christ. So, because if we keep continuing to sin, or if we fall into some forms of sin one way or another, then he brings it back up into your, you see, how are you supposed to be a follower if you're doing this and you're doing that? So the enemy is always trying to tempt us in various areas. And he always usually does it when we're most vulnerable. And remember, when Jesus was led into the wilderness by the Spirit, the devil came to him when he was most vulnerable, after he had been there for a number of days, and he began to get hungry because, he was in a human body. And that's when the enemy wants to get us too. When we're at our weakest point, he wants to tempt us, right? But once again, it's not God that's tempting us. And James tells us this quite clearly. If we go to James chapter 1, verses 12 to 15. Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Okay, James. James just slapped us in the face with what temptation does and what temptation is. I like James. James makes everything so. James just speaks straight out. You can never say you didn't understand what James was talking about when you read his book, because he tells you straight out what he meant. He tells us right here, no one is tempted by God, because God is not evil. He doesn't tempt anything, and nothing can tempt God. But each one of us is tempted when we are drawn away by our own desires and enticed. Once again, leaning on that, we make the choice. We make the choice whether we want to be tempted or not. But it also tells us that if we're successful in resisting, that we will receive the crown of life. We'll receive the crown of life. Because Hebrews 2:18 also tells us that Jesus had suffered and resisted temptation, and that he's able to assist us when we're tempted. Because it takes us back to where we started originally in Corinthians, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. Meaning that we all are tempted, all of us, at some given time, some point in our life, we're going to be faced with temptation. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. So right there, the scriptures are telling us, even though James makes it plain to us, listen, don't say God tempted you, because you get tempted when you have your own inner desires and you're enticed and you're intrigued and it draws you in, and then you sit there and that desire is conceived in your mind because you're thinking about it, and then once you think about it, then it's giving birth, because you know once you think about something so long, you're going to go do it. So that's what James is saying. The more you ponder on it, the more you're going to give birth to it, meaning you're going to walk through and you're going to commit that sin. And then once that sin is done and you keep flowing in it, it's full grown and it's going to bring about death. But Corinthians tells us that because we've all been tempted, as Christ has been tempted, how he was tempted in the wilderness, we're all subject to be tempted. But God has always been able to make a way of escape. You just have to look for it. And personally speaking, I know that to be true. There's been several times that I have been put, I can't say I've been put, because I haven't been put. Nobody didn't physically take me there. Where I put myself, let's just keep the language straight, right? Because everything we say this year and going forward, everything we say, we manifest it. So let's just speak truth all the time. When I found myself in situations where I felt that I was being tempted, I put myself in those situations. Because there's just sometimes, you know, if you go somewhere, you're going to be tempted. For example, if you like sweets, and I always go back to sweets because that was always my Achilles heel. Not any longer. I've conquered that to a certain extent. I have control over it, but it's something that I have to think about all the time. I have to keep it in the, forefront of my mind. So if you like sweets, why would you walk into a bakery? Why would you walk into a bakery? If you walk into the bakery and you know you like sweets, you're going to be tempted to purchase something. There's going to be a cookie, a cake, a tart, a pie, a sweet bread. There's going to be something there that's going to entice you to want to purchase it and then consume it. So for someone like me who loves sweets, and I say I love sweets, but now, like I said, I've also learned to control how I take sweets, my intake of sweets. Back in the day, why would I walk into a bakery? Once I walked into that bakery, I had already set in my mind, I was buying a slice of cake. I already knew the type of cake I was going to purchase. I already knew how it was going to taste. That's where James is talking about when you're enticed by your desires and you just follow through. Nobody forced me to go into the bakery to buy that cake, but I went in there anyway and I bought it. But I could have just kept walking by. And that's the way of escape that, I know I'm making it very simple, but that's the way of escape that God will provide for you. You don't have to put yourself in positions where you know you'll get weak and be tempted. That's what it's talking about here, that there's no temptation that can overtake you, that God, being faithful, will not be able to give you a way of escape to get out of it. And you'll be able to handle it. You'll be able to handle the fact that I dodged that bullet. Interesting, right? Let's ponder that for a moment. You've been listening to What Would Kay Say here on Radio Free Brooklyn, what Brooklyn sounds like. Hi, as you know, I'm Kay from What Would Kay Say, and I'd like to ask you, have you been able to actually fulfill all of your New Year's resolutions? I personally don't make resolutions because I know I'm not going to keep them. I do what works best for me in my life for that moment and how God leads me. But if you need a little bit of help, a little bit of motivation, I highly suggest that you get my book, Motivated by the Words. It's 24 transitional words that will change your life, motivated by the word, packed with information, packed with instruction, packed with leading questions that will help you in your devotion time and just in your everyday life. If you just want to improve your character, this is one book that will help you on your journey for the rest of this year. I suggest you pick it up. You can find it in Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com, Goodreads, Amazon, wherever you buy your books from, you can find this book. Motivated by the Word, I suggest you pick it up. Have a wonderful day. It is now time for the part of the show that I call Op-Ed. And today, we're going to be keeping with the theme of how God has been laying out our year, letting us know that everything that comes out of our mouth, we're bringing heaven here to earth, and that we determine our course of action because we are the ones making the decisions in our life. So when we think about our lives and we think about the abundant life that we're all looking for, because remember, it was promised to us, right? Christ said he came to bring life and so that we can have it more abundantly. So when we're all looking for this abundant life, we have to be cognizant, right? That in order for us to have this abundant life, we have to truly walk in it, meaning we have to pay attention to the decisions that we're making. And that brings us back to the topic that we're talking about today, which is temptation and how it plays a key role in whether we have an abundant life or not, right? Now, we all believe, of course, that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and that he sent the Holy Spirit to help us navigate this world in his absence until he returns, right? And God is aware of all of this because he's the one that set it all in motion, right? So he knows everything that's happening and he knows everything that's going on with us in our life all the time. And that's why he promised us the way of escape when we come with our temptations. He promised us the way of escape. And Jesus is our way of escape because he too was tempted in the wilderness and he escaped it. So if he was able to do it, we too can do it. So here I have some ways that we can overcome temptation whenever we find ourselves in those precarious situations. First of all, first and foremost, we must recognize that we can be tempted. Most people say, you can't tempt me. No, if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. I don't care. I make up my own mind. I'm my own person. You can't control what I do. Nothing is going to control me, yada, yada. If you don't acknowledge that everyone has the possibility to be tempted, then of course you're not going to even recognize the temptation when it comes, because you're going to look at it as, oh, I wanted to do that anyway. But did you really want to do it? And it goes back to the scripture that we had from the beginning, right? Verse 12. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed, lest he fall. So don't become too comfortable with yourself and say that you can't be tempted at any given moment in time. Because temptation doesn't always have to be something that's sinful. Temptation, every time when people think of temptation, the first thing they think about is, oh, is something wrong? Is something bad? No. Like I gave the example of me with the bakery. Why would a bakery be sinful? There's nothing sinful about bakeries. There's nothing sinful about a cake or a cookie. But it's still a temptation that if it's something that I'm trying to avoid, I can be enticed to indulge in, right? So the enemy knows how to trigger you in order to get you to fall for that temptation. And that goes back to the strongholds and the soul ties that we talked about. That it only takes one small change, one small whatever engagement that can change the entire course of your life. Let's go to Proverbs 16 and 18. Proverbs 16 and 18 tells us that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Haughty meaning arrogant. Like the one who, I can never be tempted. The Message Bible puts it even better. The Message Bible says, the bigger the ego, the bigger the ego, the harder the fall. Ouch, right? So even the Message Bible is telling you, when you think you can't be tempted, when you think you're in control all the time and, nothing's going to take you or knock you off course. And like I said, temptation takes place in a controlled environment. So you could be at a party, you could be at dinner, you could be anywhere in a comfortable environment around people you, air quote, trust, and be tempted. And that's why our prayers should always include what Christ told us from the Lord's Prayer. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Because remember, the Spirit led Christ into the wilderness. So our prayer is always to God, please do not lead me into temptation, Lord, but deliver me from it. But also we know that even when we are in a situation where we're tempted, God is faithful and he will give us a way of escape. Because Christ also told them in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was there praying to try to change God's mind about him going to the cross, even though he knew he couldn't. But him being human, let me try, right? Matthew 26:41. Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. So in our heart of hearts, we feel we could never be tempted. Oh no, no one could ever make me do something I don't want to do. But given that particular trigger that the enemy knows is a weakness for you, you can be. Because Christ tells you right there, the flesh is weak. And James told us that our flesh is weak and that we need to stay attached to what we know to be true, what we know to be, correct. We must remember, now this is the key part, that through all this that we've been talking about, that he wants us to remember. We play an active role in our resistance to temptation. We have the power to engage or not engage, right? But we can only do that if we acknowledge that fact, and then we can resist it. Like when the temptation comes upon you, you have a split second to say, do I want to do that or not? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't think about it. Sometimes you're just caught up in it and you go with it. But if you take that moment to step back and just be like, is this really going to be beneficial for me? Do I really want to go down that road? Because we have the capacity to make that choice. But we have to keep it a part of our spiritual walk. Meaning, the same way we confront all other things in our life, it's like, sometimes you want to make a decision. You're like, I really need to think about this. I need to pray about it. I need to, really think about it and see if it's the best decision for me. Every day when you're walking, any decision that you make, you should be keeping that in the forefront of your mind. Is this the best decision for me right now? And it's only when you stay focused on what you've purposed for yourself for that day. That's why, and I always keep going back to this, and I know you're probably saying, she's like a broken record with this. As soon as you wake up in the morning, like I said, before your feet touch that cold floor, or maybe if you have carpeting, that warm floor. However, before your feet hit the floor, you should be lying in your bed, thanking God for giving you another day, and then asking Him, Lord, what is set before me that I need to handle? And then also asking Him, Lord, make all of the crooked places straight, meaning anything that's out of skew that may take me off my mark of what you have set for me, for my course for the day, correct it so that I don't fall into temptation. Because it's those little forks in the road that we figure, we can just take this little, it's only gonna take me 5 minutes. It's those distractions, it's those little curves that you didn't anticipate that can lead you into a situation that might be tempting to you on some level, whatever it is. Tempted to, I don't know, I could come back to the office 5 minutes late. They're not gonna say anything. I'm always there in the office. Even something as small as that, even though people don't look at that as, oh, that's not a temptation. That's just, no. Everything, a temptation is anything that entices you away from what you would have normally done in that situation. And I know that sounds so like, oh my gosh, she's making it seem like even when I'm breathing air, that's a temptation. No, but if it takes you off the course of what you've already purposed your day to be, it's a distraction, yes, but it could also be a temptation. Either way, it's taking you away from what you had already designed your day to be. That's why as soon as you wake up, that should be the first thing that you talk about. Because you want to stay focused on what you have prepared for yourself for that day and what God has prepared for you for that day. Now, I'm not saying that God might not allow you to be tempted. Yes, but like we said, because God knows everything that's happening, so He knows that that temptation is going to come up. But it's up to you because you have the choice to decide whether you want to continue with it or not. And the only way that you could achieve that is to remain focused on the life that God has set before you, coupled with the grace that He gives you every day, right? And constantly staying with your mind renewed and stayed on what you have to do. That's the only way. Because if you don't, if you just keep lolly-da, whatever happens, whatever is gonna happen, yeah, you're gonna fall into temptation a lot because you're not even gonna see it coming. You're not even gonna see it coming. So Proverbs 4 also tells us, take firm hold of instruction and do not let go. Keep her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked and do not walk in the way of evil. Take hold of instruction and don't let it go, right? So all those things we can think about. If we put Christ first, if, like I said, as soon as we wake up, that's the first thing that's on our mind. Okay, what are we going to do for today? Lord, lead me not into temptation, make everything that I have to do the way that I need to do it. That keeps your mind stayed on the focus of what you have to do and the choices that you make. And even if you do come up against a choice that could be a temptation or either a distraction, you still have a way of escape from either one of them, right? So that's something that we need to keep in mind. And with that, I see that my time is growing short. And our word for this month is still Kavanaugh, which means intention, sincere feeling. To be aware that you're standing in the presence of God. And that's another thing that'll keep you from temptation. If everything that you go to think about or everything that you go to do, if it makes you have to question, would I want to do this with God watching me? Then you know it's something that you need not do. That right there is a deterrent. If you have to think about, would I want God to see me doing this even though I know I'm not supposed to do it? Then that means no, you're not supposed to do it. Okay? So we're going to live in Kavanaugh, in intention, and being aware that God is always in our presence. And our promise for this week is going to come from Matthew 7:7. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. So that right there, that promise right there, if you remember this, this will also help you stay away from temptation. Because if you ask, it's going to be given to you. Lord, please, don't let me be tempted today. Right? He just told you right here in the Word. Everything that he gives us in the Word is always ways for us to maneuver through life, because we know life has a lot of pitfalls, but he always, like he said, God is faithful. So he always makes a way of escape for everything that we do. And with that, I say, my lovelies, have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy your week. And until God sees fit to bring us back together again, peace.